What happens when America's sweetheart of home renovation finds herself in the hottest seat on television, facing questions that no one saw coming? The cameras were rolling, the audience was packed, and what started as a routine promotional appearance turned into television gold that had everyone talking. This is the story of how a simple morning show interview spiraled completely out of control, leaving viewers stunned and one very famous guest storming off set. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because you won't believe how this unfolds. Joanna Gaines walked onto the Today Show set that morning with her usual radiant smile, wearing a flowing cream-colored blouse and dark jeans that perfectly captured her signature style. The studio audience erupted in applause as she waved, clearly thrilled to see the Magnolia Network star in person. Jenna Bush Hager greeted her with the kind of warm embrace that suggested this would be another feel-good segment about home design and family values. "Joanna, we are so excited to have you here," Jenna began, settling into her chair as the applause died down. "Your new book is absolutely stunning, and I have to say, flipping through those pages just makes me want to redesign my entire house." Joanna laughed, that genuine laugh that had endeared her to millions of viewers over the years. "Well, that's exactly what we were hoping for. Chip always jokes that I'm in the business of making people dissatisfied with their perfectly good homes." The audience chuckled, and everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. Jenna's co-host leaned forward with interest. "Speaking of Chip, how do you two manage to work together so seamlessly? I mean, most couples would probably end up in therapy after renovating one room together, let alone building an entire empire." "You know, we've been asked this question 1,000 times, and the answer is always the same," Joanna replied, her voice taking on that familiar, measured tone that fans knew well. "We complement each other. Where I'm detail-oriented, he's big picture. Where I want to slow down and think things through, he wants to jump in with both feet. It works because we trust each other completely." Jenna nodded approvingly. That trust must be so important, especially when you're making decisions that affect not just your family, but your employees, your business partners, everyone who depends on Magnolia. Something flickered across Joanna's face so briefly that most viewers probably missed it, but the camera caught everything. "Absolutely. Trust is everything in business and in marriage." "Well, speaking of business decisions," Jenna continued, consulting her notes, "there's been quite a bit of discussion online about some of the choices Magnolia has made recently. I'm wondering if you could address some of the concerns that people have raised." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop a few degrees. Joanna's smile remained in place, but anyone watching closely could see her shoulders tense slightly. "I'm not sure what specific concerns you're referring to, Jenna. We're always working to improve and grow, and we listen to our customers and our community." Jenna glanced at her co-host, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Well, there have been some questions about labor practices at some of your construction sites, reports about working conditions, wage disputes, that sort of thing. I know these probably aren't the kinds of details you get involved in personally, but as the face of the brand, people look to you for answers." The smile finally faltered. Joanna shifted in her seat, and for the first time since sitting down, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Jenna, I think there might be some misunderstanding about what we're here to discuss today. I was told this was going to be about the book, about design, inspiration, about helping families create beautiful spaces, and it absolutely can be," Jenna replied smoothly, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't backing down. "But part of creating beautiful spaces is making sure that the people who build them are treated fairly, don't you think? I mean, your brand is built on values, on family, on doing things the right way. So when people raise questions about whether those values extend to everyone who works for you, it seems like something worth addressing." The studio had gone completely quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Joanna was no longer smiling at all. "I think you're making some assumptions about situations that you don't fully understand. Our company employs hundreds of people, and we work with dozens of contractors and subcontractors. We take our responsibilities seriously." "I'm sure you do," Jenna said, "but taking responsibility also means being willing to talk about problems when they arise, doesn't it? I mean, several former employees have come forward with concerns about overtime pay, about safety protocols on job sites." These aren't assumptions, Joanna. These are documented complaints. Joanna's jaw tightened. Documented? By whom? Are we talking about disgruntled former employees? Are we talking about competitors trying to damage our reputation? Because if you're going to make accusations, I think your viewers deserve to know where this information is coming from. The tension was now palpable. Jenna's co-host jumped in, clearly trying to defuse the situation. I don't think anyone is making accusations. Joanna, we're just trying to give you an opportunity to address these concerns, to set the record straight if there are misunderstandings. Set the record straight. Joanna's voice was rising slightly, and the carefully tone that usually characterized her public appearances was beginning to crack. The record is that my husband and I have spent over a decade building a business that employs people, that revitalizes communities, that brings families together. We've never hidden from difficult conversations, but I'm not going to sit here and defend ourselves against unnamed sources and vague allegations. Jenna leaned forward, her journalistic instincts clearly kicking in. But they're not unnamed sources. Joanna, we have specific individuals who have agreed to go on record. People who worked directly on Magnolia projects, who can speak to their experiences firsthand. Then why aren't they here? Joanna shot back. If these people have such serious concerns, why are they talking to reporters instead of talking to us? Why are we finding out about this on television instead of in a conversation where we can actually address whatever problems they think exist? The audience was completely silent now, watching this unexpected confrontation unfold. This was clearly not what anyone had expected when they bought tickets to see a taping about home design and lifestyle content. Jenna's co-host tried again to redirect. Maybe we could talk about how Magnolia handles employee concerns when they are raised internally. Do you have processes in place for people to voice complaints or suggestions? But Joanna was no longer interested in diplomatic answers. Of course we do. Any legitimate business does. But what I'm hearing today doesn't sound like concerns raised through proper channels. It sounds like gossip and speculation that's being presented as fact. And, frankly, I'm disappointed that a show I've always respected would choose to ambush a guest this way. Ambush. Jenna's eyebrows rose. Joanna, these are fair questions about a public company that has a significant impact on its community. Asking about labor practices and employee relations isn't an ambush, it's journalism. No, Joanna said, firmly, standing up from her chair. Journalism would have been calling my office, requesting an interview specifically about these issues, giving us time to prepare thoughtful responses, maybe even inviting someone from our HR department to speak to policy details. This is a television stunt. The studio erupted in murmurs as Joanna stood there, her hands clenched at her sides. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what was quickly becoming the most dramatic moment in today's show history. Jenna remained seated, but her expression had hardened considerably. A television stunt, Jenna repeated, her voice sharp. Joanna, we're talking about real people with real concerns about their workplace experiences. Dismissing that as a stunt is exactly the kind of response that makes people think you don't take these issues seriously. Joanna took a step back, creating physical distance between herself and the hosts. Don't you dare lecture me about taking things seriously. Do you have any idea what it's like to build something from nothing? To employ hundreds of people? To be responsible for their livelihoods? To have entire communities depending on the success of your business? And then to have that work, that responsibility, reduced to gossip and gotcha journalism? The co-host tried desperately to regain control. Joanna, please, sit back down. Let's try to have a productive conversation about this. Nobody's attacking your character or your intentions, aren't you? Joanna whirled around to face him, because that's exactly what this feels like. You invite me here under false pretenses. You blindside me with allegations that I can't properly respond to because I don't have all the details in front of me. And then you act surprised when I'm upset about it. Jenna stood up now to matching Joanna's energy. The only false pretense here is the idea that successful business owners shouldn't be held accountable for how they treat their workers. You've built your entire brand on family values and treating people right. All we're doing is asking whether you live up to those values when the cameras aren't rolling. When the cameras aren't rolling, Joanna's voice was incredulous. My entire life is lived in public. Every decision Chip and I make gets scrutinized by millions of people. We don't get to turn off our values when it's convenient, but apparently you get to turn off your professionalism when it suits your ratings. The audience was completely riveted now. This wasn't the warm, inspiring conversation they had expected, but they couldn't look away. Some people had their phones out, clearly recording what they sensed was television history in the making. Jenna's co-host made one more attempt at mediation. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Joanna, would you be willing to sit down and address some of these concerns? Even if you weren't prepared for them today, surely you can speak to your general philosophy about employee relations. Joanna turned to him with a look that could have melted steel. My general philosophy is that people should be treated with respect and honesty. My general philosophy is that if someone has a problem with how they're being treated at work, they should address it with their supervisor, with HR, through the proper channels. My general philosophy is that responsible adults don't run to the media with complaints before they've exhausted every reasonable option for resolving their concerns internally. But what if those internal channels aren't working? Jenna interjected. What if employees feel like they can't speak up without fear of retaliation? What if the power dynamic makes it impossible for them to get a fair hearing? Then they should document everything and pursue legal remedies, Joanna shot back. They should file complaints with the Department of Labor. They should contact regulatory agencies. There are systems in place to protect workers' rights. What they shouldn't do is go to entertainment reporters looking to create controversy. Jenna's eyes flashed. Entertainment reporters? Is that what you think we are? We're journalists, Joanna. We have a responsibility to our viewers to ask hard questions, even when those questions make people uncomfortable. Journalists. Joanna laughed, but there was no humor in it. Journalists do research. Journalists verify their sources. Journalists give people a fair opportunity to respond to allegations before they broadcast them to millions of people. What you're doing here is tabloid journalism dressed up in morning show clothing. The tension in the studio was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. Several audience members looked genuinely uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing a private argument that they had no business seeing. But the cameras kept rolling, and both women seemed to have forgotten that they were on live television. You know what I think this really is? Joanna continued, her voice getting stronger and more pointed. I think this is what happens when ratings start to slip and producers start looking for ways to generate buzz. I think this is what happens when legitimate news gets confused with reality television drama. I think this is what happens when the line between journalism and entertainment gets so blurred that nobody can tell the difference anymore. Jenna was clearly stung by this assessment. That is completely unfair, and you know it. We didn't manufacture these complaints, Joanna. We didn't invent these concerns. Real people came to us with real stories about their experiences working for your company. Our job is to give them a voice, not to protect your brand image, give them a voice. Joanna's tone was becoming more heated by the second, by ambushing me on live television, by creating a situation where I can't possibly give thoughtful, detailed responses to complex workplace issues. By turning legitimate business concerns into morning show theater, that's giving people a voice. The co-host was visibly sweating now, clearly out of his depth in trying to manage this escalating conflict. Maybe we should take a commercial break and try to reset this conversation. No, Joanna said firmly. There's nothing to reset. This conversation is over. She started to move toward the edge of the set, then turned back to face Jenna directly. You want to know about our values? Our values include treating people fairly, which means giving them a chance to respond appropriately to concerns. Our values include honesty, which means being upfront about the purpose of an interview. Our values include respect, which means not using people's livelihoods as fodder for television drama. Jenna wasn't backing down. And our values include holding powerful people accountable, which means asking tough questions even when they don't want to answer them. Your company has a significant impact on this community, on these workers, on the industry as a whole. That comes with responsibility, and part of that responsibility is being willing to address legitimate concerns publicly. Legitimate concerns, Joanna repeated. Based on what? Anonymous sources. Disgruntled former employees? Competitors looking to damage our reputation? You keep talking about these concerns as if they're established facts, but you haven't provided any concrete evidence. Of wrongdoing, you haven't given me specific examples that I can actually address. You've just created a cloud of suspicion and then demanded that I defend myself against it. The evidence will speak for itself, Jenna replied coolly. We have documentation, we have witness statements, we have records of complaints that were filed with various agencies. We didn't bring you here to defend yourself. We brought you here to take responsibility. Joanna stared at her for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. Take responsibility for what, exactly? For building a business that employs hundreds of people, for revitalizing downtown Waco, for creating opportunities in a community that desperately needed them? Or are you asking me to take responsibility for the fact that in any large organization there are going to be occasional conflicts, occasional misunderstandings, occasional employees who aren't happy with their experience? I'm asking you to take responsibility for creating a workplace culture where people feel safe raising concerns without fear of retaliation, Jenna said. I'm asking you to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your company isn't perfect and that there might be room for improvement in how you treat the people who work for you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Joanna looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the hosts who had just publicly questioned everything she had built. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but there was something final about it. You want me to acknowledge that my company isn't perfect? Joanna said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Vague allegations. Jenna crossed her arms. They're not vague, Joanna. We have people willing to go on record. We have documentation. We have a pattern of complaints that suggests systematic problems. A pattern based on what? Joanna shot back. 5 complaints over 10 years among 500 employees. Because context matters, Jenna, numbers matter, facts matter. The co-host tried to intervene. Maybe we could schedule a follow-up interview where you have all that information available. What I'm saying is that if you want a serious conversation about workplace issues, then let's have one. Making accusations, Jenna insisted. Is there a difference? The audience was transfixed, some recording on their phones, others staring in shock. This was unlike anything anyone had seen on morning television. Jenna's voice rose. Joanna's face flushed red. We've created jobs in a community that desperately needed them. We've turned Waco into a destination, brought tourism dollars, supported local businesses. Just because you've been successful doesn't mean everyone who contributed has been fairly compensated. Joanna stared at her, her voice ice cold. This isn't about workplace safety or overtime pay. You're using my business, my family's reputation, to make some broader point about capitalism and worker rights. This is about accountability, Jenna fired back. When you build a brand around family values, people have a right to know whether you live up to those values. And what gives you the right to be the judge of that? Joanna demanded. What expertise do you have in running a construction business, in managing hundreds of employees? The co-host looked desperately at the cameras. Joanna was done with diplomatic answers. What I want viewers to know is that we treat our people like family. We've built something special in Waco that has transformed lives in communities. And when someone tries to tear that down with gotcha journalism, it says more about them than us. Nobody's trying to tear anything down, Jenna said. We're trying to hold you accountable for your impact on real people's lives. My impact, Joanna's voice was getting louder. My impact has been providing jobs, revitalizing downtown, showing people that small towns matter. And you want to reduce that to a few disgruntled employees. Those employees are human beings with families to feed, Jenna shot back. And they are, Joanna replied, firmly, but apparently, unless we're perfect in every interaction, we're somehow failing our community. The tension reached a breaking point. Jenna leaned forward aggressively. I think you're not used to being challenged. Well, this is what real journalism looks like. Joanna went completely still. The studio was dead silent except for the hum of cameras. Real journalism would have involved reaching out weeks ago, asking for our side, giving us time to prepare responses. This isn't journalism. This is exploitation. You're exploiting these workers' concerns for drama, exploiting my reputation for ratings. Jenna was visibly angry. We have a responsibility to ask tough questions of public figures who profit from their image. How I respond? She started walking toward the edge of the set, her movement decisive. I'm done. I came here to talk about design and inspiration. Instead, I walked into a setup designed to damage my reputation. Joanna, wait, the co-host called out. No, she said without turning around. This isn't journalism. It's just cruel. Jenna stood up. Running away doesn't make these concerns disappear. And ambushing people on television doesn't make you a journalist. Jenna, it just makes you someone willing to use other people's pain for your own gain. With that, she walked off the set, leaving behind stunned silence and the most dramatic exit in morning television history. So what do you think? Was Joanna right to walk off when she felt ambushed? Subscribe now and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Joanna's situation